Hello and welcome back to our second roundtable discussion. This week, we're going to be. Last week we really focused on a lot of my questions were focused on the book, Still Unbelievable, but I realized the fans really want to focus on the podcast, The Unbelievable Show, with David and Andrew versus Justin Brierly and Randal Rauser. So I focused my questions. I've got 3 questions of my own based on the show. And then I've got about 4 questions from the audience so that we're gonna discuss. But just before we get into that, I think David has an announcement he'd like to make.
Okay, so it's just about audio from the last roundtable we did. So we've got 4 people on Skype. So first of all, there are going to be some Skype audio artifacts with a little robotic sound here and there and some cutouts here and there. Can't do anything about that. Deal with it. The other thing, though, is a much bigger thing. Someone wrote in and said, I'm listening to this podcast, and there are long silences where I think that David should be speaking, but it's just silence. This was not a special edited edition from Andrew, although that's the first thing I suspected, too. Actually, what happened was the way that I'm recording this, it ended up being some kind of strange stereo mix where 3 of the participants were kind of in the middle toward the right side of the mix, and I was panned all the way to the left side of the mix. And so this person who had the problem was only wearing one earbud, and he was not wearing the earbud where I was, and none of my comments bleeded over to his side. So it's a stereo thing. If anything like that happens again, and I can't promise that I fix the problem because, frankly, I haven't had time to really troubleshoot it. So if something like that happens again, and I will also put this on the blog where this lands, just make sure you're listening to both ears. The audio is there. It just may have gotten panned all the way to one side or the other. And so my apologies for that. And so the next time we do this, I'll check the software, make sure that this doesn't happen.
And I just want to say, if I am ever going to hack a podcast and have something happen to David's audio, it won't be silence. I will do something a lot more fun than just have David go quiet.
Oh, please let it be Klingon. Please let it be a Klingon insert.
There you go.
I don't like the way this is going, Dale. Please.
I am the moderator. Okay, so that's a good comment there, Andrew. Thank you very much, David.
Well, I give a technical thing, and then Andrew talks about how he's going to torpedo me, and you give him the attaboy?
Who's the moderator, David?
Check is in the mail down there. I promise it's in the mail.
This is going to be a tough one.
Andrew is now an honorary Canadian.
Nice. Okay. So yeah, just one thing I forgot. Bad on me as the moderator as well. Just to give a shout out to. So this is a combined podcast. So. We obviously have our Skeptics and Seekers podcast, which is at skepticsandseekers.wordpress.com. Think I got that right. And also the Ask an Atheist podcast. So that's with Matt.
Ask an Atheist anything.
Ask an Atheist anything at the Reasons Press website. And that's
single reason. Reason Press, singular.
Okay. Reason Press website.
.net.
Why don't you do it then?
It's the Reason Press website .net.
Okay.
So it's okay. So for the listeners who are probably having audio trouble right now, no, it is Ask an Atheist Anything. You can find us at reasonpress.net.
Beautiful. All right. So yeah, let's get straight into this then. So first, we're going to start off with the 3 questions that I had based on what I heard in the show. And this one's going to be no surprise. So we addressed the idea of objective versus subjective morality. I have sort of a different take because I prefer to call it necessary morality or whether you think there are necessary moral truths. And I think that's really what the Christian wants to get at. We don't want morality to be arbitrary, but to be reflective of some kind of necessary standard. So in the first place, I think from the show we already know David and Andrew's answer, but they can clarify that. And I'm interested in Matt's answer. But in the first place, do you think there are any such things as necessary moral truths? And second part is, let's just assume for a second that there are such truths. Would you at least agree if there are these truths, then that would need some kind of grounding in a necessary being such as God? So yeah.
Let me just before you hand the mic over, can I ask you to clarify your definition? What do you mean by moral? We use this word a lot and we throw it around. It has a lot of hidden baggage in there, and I just want to know what we are or are not agreeing to before we answer this question. What do you mean by moral?
It's just sort of the common sense understanding. They're truths that pertain to morally relevant situations.
No, but you're using moral again, and I'm asking you to define moral or morality. What do you mean by that?
I know that you're trying to get me to say it's defined by God's nature, therefore it's not a valid question.
I'm just trying to get you to define it at all. Now, I do believe that when Christians say it, they are sneaking in some things about God's nature in there. But I want to make sure that we've got a clean word. I mean, could for instance, we substitute
ethical? Let's
ethics.
call it ethical.
Okay. So
sure.
if you would re-ask your question with the word ethics, I will withdraw my pedantic definition question.
Sure. Are there necessary ethical truths then?
So let me ask a follow-up and just make sure that we are actually talking about ethics. So when we talk about this thing that we're about to agree to, we're actually talking about the consequences of actions between individuals in the sense of right and wrong. Now, I did not phrase that as good and evil deliberately. So we're talking about ethical rights and wrongs, and presumably the Christian might talk about good and evil in a way that skeptics would not. But that's where we are, right?
Okay.
Do we agree? We're talking about attempting to quantify and make decisions about rights and wrongs between individuals.
Yes, exactly. And the question focuses on, are these necessary kind of thing? Yeah. So I'll Andrew, you go first since you're just asking the last one. What do you think?
Okay. All right. So we have a team notebook that we share, and my response is in there, Dale. I don't know if you've seen it.
No, I haven't.
But okay, so it is in the OneNote notebook.
Okay.
It seems to me that the skeptic who does not accept objective moral truth has already answered the question. If I don't accept that there is such a thing as objective moral truth in the sense that the Christian means it, so truths that emanate from God, I am actually saying that I don't accept that for anyone. But it seems to me that there's a larger issue here, and that is the issue where you say that these are necessary truths. Well, we know that there are things of necessity about humans that don't require a God, at least from the skeptical perspective, right? So I have certain instincts like fight or flight, and I am not convinced that it is impossible to have a moral truth that necessarily stems from an entirely natural environment. So even if you force me to agree that there are objective truths, you haven't gotten to forcing me to agree that these moral truths, these necessary truths, emanate from God. So that's
okay.
that's my position.
Okay. But the second part you missed, actually, sorry, Andrew, if I did convince you of this, would you agree that that would imply the need for God, or do you think these necessary moral or ethical truths could be grounded in something else apart from God's nature or something like that?
Well, so I think when you use the word necessary, I've got the usual meta-ethical objection to it. If you're saying that the truth itself is necessary, then in some way you're implicating God, because a necessary truth is not a contingent truth. And so I think right away, now I realize there are some objections to this, and you and I may go after this in a podcast of our own, right? Okay. The nature of necessity. But I do think there's an important implication about crafting objective truth as necessary. Because the moment you craft it as necessary, I think you're necessarily saying it's non-contingent. And at that point, you're saying that God is not the founder of that truth.
Okay. How about you then, Matthew? What would your take be on these two questions?
Firstly, I'm puzzled by the use of the word truth, where I would normally see the word values. Mm-hmm. I think it's a strange word to use in this context. So when I'm done, I'd like to see what I'd like your take on what the difference is between a moral truth and moral value, if there is even a difference. I also need a clear understanding of what is meant by necessary in this question, and I'm going to assume, for the purpose of my answer, that it's a similar meaning to word objective. So I'm conflating necessary moral truth with objective moral value. If I'm wrong, you'll need to correct me.
Okay.
In that it claims that, so I'll assume that it is similar to objective in that it claims that there are no moral values which are not subject to, I'll restart that sentence. I'll assume that the use of necessary is similar to the use of objective in that it claims that there are moral values which are not subject to subjective human opinion and are somehow imparted onto us from an external source. These values are absolute and cannot be contravened. If this is the case, then yes, that external source needs to be explained. And it is possible that source could be a god, but I don't think that automatically concludes that it comes from a god. There could be a non-god explanation. However, the first step is showing that the claim is true and that there are, in fact, necessary moral truths or objective moral values. And when you've done that, then we can work on what the source is. But first, you need to show that there are, and I don't accept that there are.
Okay, and how about you, David?
Okay, so first, I did not read the questions in advance. I know that you sent them out, and I did not look at them. So I wanted to approach them as fresh as possible. Also, I've been really busy.
David's been putting in a lot of work for our podcast extravaganza week. So I just want to say you deserve a lot of credit for everything you've been doing. So
let me just say, podcast extravaganza week. Dumb idea. That's a really dumb idea when you're the one doing all the editing and stuff.
It needs to be rebranded as something other than podcast extravaganza week. That's Pew. P-E.
Well,
slow motion.
Just call it the sweetie bucket.
Ever suggest another podcast extravaganza week, I expect one of my close friends to hit me upon the head until I am unconscious. So
there are so many volunteers.
I'm on to Expedia.com right now, booking my plane ticket.
Not everyone all at once. So with that in mind, I'm going to have to agree with Matthew's first instinct, which is to say that to add truth to this question is question begging. It is the very definition of begging the question, because you are assuming the conclusion in the question that there are moral truths, moral facts to start with. And so the moment you do that, I think that the well is pretty well poisoned. So I would follow Matthew's objection. I think that calling it that poisons the question. Now, my objection was to the word moral because of a lot of the baggage that carries. I also want to object to another couple of words that have not been used, which is good and evil, which also carries a lot of baggage. So we switch to ethics, but we still have, in defining ethics, we still have to talk about right and wrong. Okay, so right according to whom, wrong according to whom, or maybe right for whom or what situation, or wrong for whom or what situation. You can't just assume a single definer or a single point of view of right and wrong to do this. So when I talk about ethics, I am specifically limiting myself to things that are either socially beneficial, or socially detrimental. And I look at that as a continuum with the beneficial on the one end, you can call that good, and the detrimental on the other hand, we can call that bad. And all actions fall somewhere within that continuum. There is a deep middle where actions just don't trigger either side. It's neither socially good nor is it socially detrimental. And those actions I don't even think of in the ethical sense. They are aethical, if you will, or amoral, in that morality doesn't even come up for them. Ethics doesn't even come up for them. Whether you eat cornflakes this morning or Rice Krispies is not an ethical decision. And so that would be aethical or amoral, if you will. Whether you decide to take a gun and shoot innocent people out of school, that would be a very socially detrimental thing, and therefore easily on the bad side of the scale. And then you can donate, a lot of money to curing a disease, and I think that would be on the good side of the scale. So I'm wanting to define these terms for myself, so that we can know what baggage I'm bringing, and also eliminate the hidden baggage that's often brought to these terms. Now, once you understand it from my perspective, you'll see that the question doesn't really have much meaning, because necessary ethics, it's always a matter of what the situation is. It's always a matter of that. I can't think of too many things. There's some things that are emotional hot buttons, but I honestly can't think of too many things where you can say, well, this is clearly wrong. Where I couldn't come up and say, well, but if the situation were like this, then it would be less wrong. Or you say, well, this is clearly right. This is always a good thing. Well, no, I can think of some situations where that's a bad thing. It always depends on the situation. Ethics is almost by definition situational. And so I disagree with the premise that there are specific moral truths that stand apart from social harm and social benefit that are divorced from the situation somehow.
Dale, can I ask you a question? And happy to give you.
Let's do that. But I'm looking at the time.
Sure. I'm happy to give you the last word on this.
Okay, but I think I have the second part of the question though. So before you ask the question,
yeah.
Dale,
would you like to ask the first part of my question? Are you prophesying?
So here's what we'll do.
No. There's a second part to Dale's question.
David will answer. David will answer the second part. Then Andrew, I'll let you ask my question. But so that'll be the plan of action.
Sure. Fair enough. Go ahead.
Okay, what's David?
Okay, so the second part of your question is, if we were to concede that there were some definite moral truths that were apart from human agreement, apart from situations, apart from all that, which I will never actually believe. But if we were to believe that, then does that mean that there must be a God? And the answer is no, for the same reason that Euthyphro's dilemma still stands, despite the number of people who think they've defeated it. Because the fact of the matter is, if there is a situation where this is the right thing, and it's the right thing in every possible universe, then it is the right thing independent of whether there is a God or not. It is simply the right thing because it is the right thing. And so the answer would be no. If you found something that was objectively true, you wouldn't need a God to make it objectively true. It would be independent of mind, including God's mind.
Okay. So Andrew,
I like that answer.
Hey, you were on my side just a couple minutes ago on that one.
I'm easily swayed, boy.
Okay. Well, no, that's good. That means you're open to considering the evidence and changing your mind. But so Andrew, you had a question for me?
I do. It's in two parts. So, do you think that all moral truths are necessary truths?
Yes.
Or, okay, you do think all moral truths are necessary truths. So there is no moral truth that can have a subjective component. For instance, when a child reaches for a stove and one parent chooses to slap the child's hand and another parent chooses to verbally warn the child, there is a necessary true answer there.
Yeah, if like I don't think that either option is necessarily wrong. So I'm not sure the moral question, like, it depends what you mean by slapping the hand. Like, I might react quickly and just like, oh, no, don't do that or something. And I'm not trying to hurt the kid. I'm just trying to stop it. Like, don't get hurt. So I'm not yeah.
So that sounded like a very subjective answer, to be honest.
Well, it's subject. Okay, so you asked me if subjective elements can be a part of it. Yes, they're involved, okay. But there's still that necessary moral truth, which would apply. Let's say it is wrong to slap a hand versus give a verbal warning or something. Okay, well, that would be it's necessarily morally wrong to slap the hand. You should give a verbal warning or something.
Okay. Now, since you've said there can be subjective components, can you always know? So the problem with claiming that these two can live in the same ecosystem is that for your objective moral truths to stand, you have to be able to always determine which is the objective component and which is the subjective component. If you cannot, what you are left with is some objective components that can be subjective and vice versa. And if you're saying no, there cannot be any subjective components, then what you're left with is there is a right and wrong that we can't always know.
Sure. I don't think our moral consciences are infallible in every respect. I myself, like, okay, I know because the Bible tells me that certain sins are wrong, but my moral conscience itself, like, I didn't think it was wrong before I was a Christian. I still don't see, exactly what's wrong with certain sinful behaviors. So I derive that from Scripture. My moral conscience is damaged because of the effects of sin, but that doesn't deny that I have at least some necessary moral truths. So, I prepared some, like, I didn't prepare, but I was writing down these notes. So, okay, so you asked me about what I mean by necessary, and I think I'm more in tune with what Andrew's saying when he's talking about the nature of metaphysical necessity. So I'm saying it's a moral truth that applies in every logically possible world. That's what I mean by necessary. It's true. It's a true proposition that the moral thing to do is not slap the hand, but give a verbal warning. This truth is true in every possible world. Why do I use the word moral truths instead of the usual principles and values? Because truths it's a wider application that includes principles and values. It also includes what I call tactile morality, or like specific situations, or more, there's different morally relevant circumstances which could apply in some situations but not in others. But those necessary moral truths are specific to those situations, to those different situations. So I don't believe morality is are absolute, if that's what you're trying to say. Even when I'm saying necessary, there's a difference between absolute absolute there. The best I could say that I think is absolute, it would be these moral principles or values which determine, the tactile morality or applied ethics. What is morally right in a specific situation? But yeah, like if there's different morally relevant circumstances, that can change the proper moral response.
Thank you. Thank you for answering it. I won't follow it up, but if one of us should put a note in the notebook, because I think there's some interesting ground there. How to know. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say we can continue the conversation on the blog, which happens a lot. These conversations go on, and then they live on other shows beyond that. So I just wanted to say there's ample opportunity to follow up, and also for the community to jump in and be a part of it.
Yeah, thanks for the full answer, Dale. I don't think I agree, but I look forward to following it up.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. All right. Well, this is sort of the next question then is a related one. Again, it's on the moral argument, but it's one thing because I know a lot of people on the blogs, and David mentioned this, that Justin Brierly wanted to focus in his book on the moral argument for God in general, like some sort of general theism concept. He wasn't getting it. You guys are totally off topic when you're talking about the Old Testament conquests or the morality of the God. And I think David had a relevant counter to that, yeah, but you're a Christian. It's not just the fact, we're not just interested in some God of the philosophers, but the Christian God as well. Why do we want to know if the Christian God is actually God? But here's where I disagree with you guys, but I think they have a valid point, because I do see that there should be, there can be, let's say that, a separation. I myself came to faith by first believing in general theism. So, maybe I am convinced that there are these necessary moral truths and God is the explanation for that. Okay, now I'm a general theist. Then I can assess the secondary question. Well, does the Christian God as described in the Bible reflect that morally perfect God? So that's what my question is I want to put to you guys, do you see this as somehow problematic or invalid to separate the questions? Like it's not that we're dividing and then ignoring, we're dividing, but just delaying. We're still going to come to that issue of whether the biblical God is moral or not. But it's just one step at a time. We're building a cumulative case. So yeah, I'll pass it to Matt first this time, because I think Andrew went first last.
Okay, well, we've already established that I don't think that the moral argument gets to a God anyway. But if you want to make the leap to the Christian God, my response, like many people in my position, is going to be, which Christian God? Do you want the God that flooded the world and drowned millions? Or do you want the God that didn't do that, but he lets the story stand to be used as a warning not to piss him off?
Okay, so that's not my question, though. It's, do you think that, how Justin tries to argue for some kind of general theism and avoids discussion in his book from what he's told us on the show, he avoids, getting into the issues of, well, the Old Testament conquests are immoral, therefore this Christian God, like they're two separate questions. Is that invalid in your opinion?
Well, I still end up on the angle of which Christian God, because you go to different churches around the country, your country or mine, or David and Andrew's, whichever country you want to pick, and you'll find different descriptions of, in quote, inverted commas, the Christian God. So I think saying which Christian God do you want is valid. But if we take that as a generalistic and say, okay, let's take it as a Christian God rather than just any God, I'm not really sure how that differentiates from where Justin's position is.
Yeah, I'm supporting Justin. I'm saying it is valid, or I'm not. Okay, I'm asking a question if it is valid or not. So, can't you separate the question of whether first we have a general theism and then worry later on down the road. Then we're worried about which of the Christian gods.
I don't think the moral argument is what's the word I'm looking for? Is nuanced enough to differentiate between gods.
Gotcha.
Because in the answer to my previous one, I said we need to first establish whether or not they're morals, and then we can examine, objective morals or necessary morals, however we want to define it. In the answer to the previous question, I said first we need to establish that as the fact. So let's assume, for the sake of this question, that has been established. How do you then determine which God there is? I don't think the moral argument is sophisticated enough. Crumbs, I just used that word. I don't think the moral argument is sophisticated enough, nuanced enough, pick whichever word you like, to establish a particular God. I don't think it's equipped to do that. I think you need something else.
Gotcha.
Dare I say it, something more scientific to differentiate between which God it is, which potential God it is that actually exists. And I really don't see the moral argument as being capable of doing that.
Fair enough. And
I don't think it's the right tool for answering that question.
Yeah, and I'll just one quick thing I actually agree with you. I don't think the intention of the moral argument is to get that sort of specific.
Are we allowed to agree?
But yes,
is there, are we allowed to agree? Oh my word!
I'm editing this whole section out.
But I would say that shoot, I had a good point.
I'm sorry, Dale. I was being too facetious.
No worries. Okay, it was a good one, but I was just gonna say, the point of the question that I'm asking, I don't care about whether, let's pretend the moral argument is garbage. It's a failure. It's still, my question is it still okay to separate this question from moral issues surrounding the biblical God? And I'll turn it over to David this time. What's your response to this?
Let me just run right at that, because I think I understand what you're asking. The answer is no. So I'm gonna start with no. Absolutely not. You cannot separate these questions. You cannot try to establish a general theism first and then circle in on, getting around to the God of the Bible. Because if a Christian establishes general theism, I think they almost exclude the God of the Bible by nature. So Christians are not, in fact, trying to establish a general theism. They are trying to establish a specific theism. And so, I think that first step is a disingenuous step. And I think that when Christians take it, I'm sorry, I'm about to get acerbic. I think that Christians are being totally disingenuous when they talk about the method of what do you call gradual adding
general
bits of evidence? You're adding bits of evidence. Yeah, accumulative. Thank you. I think the accumulative case is a completely disingenuous attempt by Christians, and I think that when you talk about the moral argument, this stepped case, we'll prove this thing, and then we'll prove the next thing, and then we'll prove the next thing, is disingenuous. And here's why. Because we can all agree here. Even you can add some more Christians to the panel, and they will agree. You can add William Lane Craig to the panel, and he will agree that the moral argument does not get you to God. He knows that. Every Christian knows that. Here's the problem. So they'll say, well, this just gets you to agree that there must be some kind of theistic answer, and then we'll get to God. They never build that bridge. Never build that bridge. They never go back to this general God and then prove the specific God. It never happens. They never intend for it to happen. It's disingenuous. I would dare say it's a lie. But here's the other reason you can't do that. Because the God of the Bible has a record, and we can read the record. It's a record of his thoughts, his actions, his motives. We have a record of that God. Now, the moral argument describes the kind of God that only does good, right things. however you define that. The God of the Bible clearly does not only do good, right things. It cannot be the God. I would not even say that, it's possible that it could be that God. No, it's impossible for it to be the God of the Bible. If what we're doing is looking at a record of good, and we're saying that the moral argument leads to a God that is all good, they cannot meet. It cannot be the same thing, and so you cannot use the moral argument to lead to some kind of general theistic landing point and then try to build a bridge to a God where it clearly does not apply. No and no.
Okay, Andrew, what are your thoughts?
So David took the last 3 minutes to give you my answer, but I think I want to go a step further and talk about why I think attempting the moral argument in the case specifically of the Christian God is out of bounds. We heard it on this episode of Unbelievable that David and I participated in. At the beginning of the show, Randal accused the writers of Still Unbelievable of bringing up material that wasn't in Justin's book. What was that? That was the Old Testament. And Randal's objection was, well, hey, we disagree over the Old Testament. And when we came back from the commercial break, I said, yeah, but even if you didn't have the Old Testament, you still disagree. Here's the bigger problem. If you are suggesting that Christians should distance themselves from the Old Testament because the Old Testament casts that God in some specific moral light that is unfavorable to that God, then I, as a skeptic, have no reason to cozy up to the New Testament as a better moral authority because it's the same God. And I don't have any legitimate reason, as far as I can tell, for thinking that the God of the New Testament is necessarily more moral. He just seems like a God who changed his mind a little bit, and I don't know that he won't again in the future.
Perfect. Yeah, and on that front, that was a point you made in the show. I would agree 100% in the sense that the God of the New Testament is the same as the God of the Old Testament. So, they would stand or fall together. But yeah, I would just say, I think I disagree with your and David's take that, no, they are separable. It is valid to separate, but not ignore. If I'm doing what you're saying in terms of, we got the moral argument that gets us God, but think no further. Don't pay attention to that Joshua text or anything like that. Then I would agree with you guys. But that's not what Justin is saying. He's just saying, look, let's deal with this one topic at a time. Let's get you to a God who's the foundation of morality. Then you have this other question. Well, does the biblical God live up to that foundation of morality or not? They can be two separate questions, and that's the way I came to faith. I sure as heck was not disingenuous or, trying to play a mental trick or anything. That's what, that is a valid means of, coming to faith, in my opinion. So that would be my take there. Just looking at the time, let's move on to the third, and this is the last of my questions. So you guys, for the audience, we'll be getting to the questions that you guys are more interested in. But this one is actually one I'm really excited to get. It's about the resurrection. And I've tried to put, not just go over the same thing that you guys have already said, although there will be some overlap. But it's in relation to the minimal facts approach. So this is, again, a two-part question, and I know David's already answered some people on the boards about this, but I'll be interested in hearing everyone. So in the first place, there's two different levels. There's, the factual basis when you're establishing the case for the historicity. So those are the minimal facts case, that type of thing. And then there's analyzing those facts on an explanatory level. So do you want me to ask both parts at once?
Yeah, ask
or should
both at once.
Yes, go both parts.
Mention
Gotcha.
who asked the question if you have that written down.
This one is mine.
Okay.
But yeah, I noticed a lot of feedback from a bunch of people on the resurrection on both Randal's site and Unbelievable. So that's why I wanted to ask it. Plus, this was the second topic of the show. So yeah, in the first place, I'm wondering if you think that if any of you think that any of the minimal facts that Christian apologists present can be said to be either historical, or at the very least, you would agree that it's reasonable for a Christian to think these facts are historical.
Ooh, pick me.
Yep, you're first after
We all
this.
get picked. We all get picked.
Yeah, but I'm keeping track. I went with Andrew on the first one, then Matt first on the second. So that's David. You're going to go first, David, on this one.
This will be my shortest answer.
Okay, but my second aspect.
Okay.
So this is on the explanatory level. So assuming there are any of these facts that you guys would grant are at least reasonable for a Christian to believe, are there any of these facts that you think could be somewhat problematic to explain with purely natural mechanisms? Are there any natural explanations are there any facts that you think natural explanations appear to be strained or that sort of thing? That's it. So yeah, David, go ahead. I know you're chomping at the bit.
I am. And take this bit out of my mouth. Here's the thing. I don't care. So I'm going to let Andrew and Matthew actually deal with the question, because I got some polemic to get off here. Okay. The true answer in my emotional self is I don't give a damn about whether any of the minimal facts are actually facts, because I can grant you all of them. I can grant you all 6, including the empty tomb, which is one that Gary Habermas even doesn't include. So if I grant you the absolute truth of every one of them, and you can throw in a few more if you like, it still doesn't get you all the way to a resurrection. There is still a place where if you're crossing this bridge and you're trying to get to the other side, there's still a half a bridge that you're going to have to leap over with the wings of faith. It does not get you all the way over there. And so the minimal facts are still too minimal to get you to a resurrection. So this is the problem with evidentialists in general. You think you've got evidence for the proof of the existence of God and the ministry of Jesus and the resurrection of Jesus. Even if we grant all of the things that you call proof, it only builds you half a bridge. And you still have to use the same faith mechanism as people who don't claim to be evidentialists. So that's why I say I don't care about the question, because at the end of the day, you still got to use the same faith that non-evidentialists have to use. Your second question.
Well, you just answered. Yeah, I think you just answered it. But okay, go ahead.
Sure. Well, ask it again, though, because I had something specific to say about that. I just forgot how it was worded.
No problem. So yeah, I guess basically I was asking about, okay, even if you grant these facts at the explanatory level, is there anything about it that are there any of these facts that you think a naturalistic explanation could at least reasonably be said to be improbable or problematic or strained, something like that?
Well, so naturalistic explanations don't interest me either. Because if we're talking about the Bible and we're trying to prove the greatest miracle on earth, we don't need naturalistic explanations. We're looking for miraculous explanations. And so if what you're asking for is, do any of the minimal facts, can they not be explained with naturalistic explanations? The answer is no. Every one of the minimal facts can be explained with a naturalistic explanation. And so that is far more likely, whatever the naturalistic explanation is, it's far more likely than something happened outside of what is naturally possible. Now, let's just say we apply a non-zero possibility to something happening outside of nature. It's still lower than the naturalistic explanation we come up with. So, once again, in reverting back to the first answer, it only gets you so far, and you've got to use the same tool of faith that the non-evidentialist has to use to get across that river. The bridge won't go far enough.
Okay, Andrew, you're next. Andrew, hello? Can anyone hear me?
Mate?
I got you. I will ring Andrew Again, he may have fallen off of Skype. It's a, it's a
I didn't mean to
it's a
offend.
short platform, and
I didn't mean to offend.
No, it's. I saw an opportunity to just push him into the river, and I did it.
I'm here.
Oh, no, never mind. I didn't do a good job.
So yeah, I was
Sorry. No, I was on mute, just to avoid any background noise. And we've been picking up some on the line during this episode. There's been some clicking and whatnot, so I was making sure that it wasn't me. And because of the way Skype handles the iPhone dialer, I was having trouble getting past the Skype interface to get to the mute button. So at any rate,
it was rather unpleasant while you were
Android.
Okay, so you did want David to have to dial me again. Okay. All right. Dale, in the middle of fumbling with the interface, I lost the thread. Would you ask me that a part at a time?
Yep. So the first part deals with the evidence for the resurrection on a factual level. Are there any, historical facts or minimal facts that Christian apologists present that you think is at least reasonable to believe is true? And then the second is on the explanatory level of these facts that you might grant. Is there anything where you think, the naturalistic explanations are somewhat problematic in explaining them?
Okay, fair enough. So to the first part, yes, people die all the time. Yes, they crucified people. Yes, we have empty graves. Happy to give you all of that.
Thanks.
Now,
You're too kind to me, man.
so are there any of those, and of the other minimal facts, such a little tongue-in-cheek, are there any of the other minimal facts that I think get us to the resurrection even being equally likely to some natural explanation? No.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, all right, excellent. Matt, it's your turn.
You're not even going to get half a bridge from me, I'm afraid. The only fact that I would accept is that the Romans crucified a lot of people, including some who were allegedly messiahs. Go and do a Google search now. You can find individuals other than Jesus who had a Messiah label attached to them. The crucifixion of Jesus, if it happened at all, wasn't unique. And as for the facts attributed to Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection, I see no compelling reasons at all to accept any of them. They are claimed in a religious text which is motivated to paint Jesus as the one and only Messiah, and by that definition, it makes it biased and suspect. And those claims cannot and should not be accepted as unquestionable fact, and to do so is dishonest.
Just out of curiosity, if you don't mind me asking,
they call me acerbic.
But I know David and Andrew's. I think Andrew's position. But would you say you're a mythicist? You don't believe Jesus even existed then?
I am genuinely on the fence. Is the honest answer. I'm not sufficiently convinced either way that any position is true. If you nail me to a corner and say I have to pick one, I'm more likely to fall on the mythicist side. But I don't think there's enough information to confidently claim mythicism. But at the same time, there isn't enough information for me to claim that Jesus as a person existed. So I'm driving down the middle of the road on that, and I don't think there'll ever be enough information for me to move out of that lane.
And I don't want to leave my friend Matthew hanging, and so I will come out of the closet right now.
Oh, I was trying careful not to reveal.
It's okay. I'm going to out myself.
Okay.
I am a Star Trek fan. Also,
David.
I am a reluctant mythicist. So I argue as if Jesus were real. I have written 3 books. It's still unbelievable being a part of one book and 2 other books. One I'm about halfway done with, one I'm completely done with, that argue as if Jesus were actually real and everything that the Bible says about him is true. I don't believe that for a moment. I think it's easier to argue that way. I don't need Jesus to not be real to make a compelling case against Christianity. It's like I said, it's really easier to argue against Christianity if you just assume certain things about Jesus. But all of those things are things that I grant for the sake of argument. The fact of the matter is, and I don't want to be, but I am a mythicist. I'm a reluctant mythicist. I would rather not be a mythicist. I don't know how strong of a mythicist I am. Someone could convince me that Jesus is real. It wouldn't matter because I already argue as if he were real. And so I don't want to leave Matt hanging out there by himself on that particular.
I like being in the middle all on my own. It's where all the best dancers are.
And you are going to be in the middle because I am not a mythicist.
Okay.
I am, well, you mentioned a moment ago that David and I might share the same opinion. We have, in fact, had some knockdown dragouts over this mythicist thing.
Why won't he stay down?
I'm with you, Andrew.
It's because you hold a bad position. No, look, here's my actual view. And David or Matthew, either one may well be right. I am not a mythicist. I suspect that the Jesus character is compiled. Now, I think there probably was an itinerant Christian preacher somewhere in the past, and maybe his name was Jesus. I don't actually care in the sense that mythicism stacks up against a historic Jesus in the sense that we mean it. In the you can read the pages of the New Testament, and here's this guy that called 12 disciples, and then there were eventually apostles, and one of them was named John, and he was baptized, and et cetera, et cetera. That character does not exist. I suspect that there might have been a character that is the root of the Jesus story, but whoever he is, he's not the character painted in the pages Matthew through Revelation.
Fair enough. Yeah, thank you guys so much. I swear I wasn't trying to force you guys to reveal your positions on that, but yeah, thank you guys. I think the audience will appreciate hearing your thoughts on that front. So
I think it's cool that we all have a different answer to that one.
Well, yeah, I think it's cool that Andrew.
Well, you haven't heard my answer yet.
Andrew thinks he's not a mythicist. And
please rearrange the.
What do you mean by mythicist? Yeah.
Please rearrange the following words into a phrase you understand. Me, fight.
Mythicist. That's okay.
I think I got that. So yeah, I'll just provide my quick take then. So I do believe on a factual level that. I do believe the minimal facts, or at least a lot of the minimal facts, are true. And I even go beyond that. I do believe the empty tomb is probably historical. I believe in the appearance to the 500 as well.
That's interesting.
It is.
Hey, Andrew, do you think we should,
that verse? I really do.
Do you think we can argue mythicism on our next regularly scheduled Skeptics and Seekers?
Yes. Please do. Please, you guys.
What do you say, Dale?
It's your topic.
It is my topic
next week, so
and we'll be queuing it up probably Tuesday. So. Yeah, let's.
I want to tear apart that 500 people verse.
There you go. Let's do this.
By the way, for the listeners, the 500 people verse is Matthew 27 verses 51 to 53.
That's the zombie passage. The 500 people.
That's the 500 we're talking about.
It's
Dale, was that not?
No. The 500 is in First Corinthians. The First Corinthians.
Oh,
First Corinthians.
My apologies.
It's when Paul invents 500 witnesses.
Look, that's equally culpable to Matthew 27.
Paul doesn't know anything about the zombies in Matthew 27. He never heard of them.
That's because he hadn't had another epileptic seizure yet.
Okay.
The person who forged Corinthians in Paul's letter just rearranged that Matthew verse and put it in as 500.
Okay, but I do want to ask, Dale, because this is your mic. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to steal your time, but I do want to understand whether you think Matthew 27, 51 to 53, maybe the resurrection of the 500.
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Was that a historic event where actual dead people got up and went into Jerusalem?
So I'm not dogmatic. It could be. I don't see any reason, to think that that's ridiculous compared to Jesus rising or something like that. But
Sure.
I lean toward Mike Lacone. I think this is apocalyptic literature. Okay. So yeah, I would say on a balance. Yeah, that would be my take. I think he's right.
And I would say, as I will be glad to repeat on the next Regular Skeptics and Seekers, to even give that a little bit of credence, is bat shift crazy.
And by apocalyptic, do you mean it's yet to happen?
No, that's the genre of it. Like they use, in Acts, they'll quote from Joel, like the moon turned to blood and stuff like that. That's apocalyptic or symbolic type language, just like Revelation. Like I don't believe that the beasts are meant to be taken literal or all those type things. So it's the same genre at that point that Revelation is, or Jewish apocalyptic language.
It should be taken no more seriously than when a drunk staggers out of a bar saying, "The moon, it's blood, beware." Okay. That's your apocalyptic language right there.
But let's move on to our audience questions now, so you guys don't have to put up with what interests me and that sort of thing. So this one is an interesting one actually, and it comes from our friend Tara. And this is about the role of emotions in relation to knowing truth. Tara she basically says that the problem with Christians is that they lack emotionality. And in the context, it's sort of about, those immoral Bible verses. But really, I want this question to be general, in general, including everything. What is the role of emotions that you think is, are they valid to coming to knowledge of truth in any matters? Are they just totally useless? I'll open it up, and it's Andrew's turn to go first this time. What do you think?
Oh, well, do emotions play a role in coming to truth? I'd say they play exactly the same role in coming to a knowledge of the truth as they do in coming to the knowledge of a falsehood.
Okay.
That's my answer.
Perfect. And David now.
I agree.
You guys aren't taking the question seriously.
I am taking it. Okay, look. Okay.
No, I am.
This is Tara's, not mine.
This is. I understand.
I am taking it seriously.
I thought.
Sorry,
I
Dave.
thought Andrew's answer was great, and I was perfectly willing to save time by saying what he said. Not that I don't have any opinions or thoughts. So, Tara, we love you, Tara. I am so glad to have you on the show in this way, Tara. I'm so glad that we're not talking about the consciousness stuff, Tara. So thank you for not asking that. I do take it seriously.
Let me go at that a little. Dale, I don't want a listener to come to the conclusion that I did not take a question seriously.
Okay.
I will happily give you the exact backstory I have for that question. When we talk about truth between us, I'm not talking about what any individual might think of as truth, but when we are talking about a shared truth, we are talking about those things that you and I can do independently to arrive at the same answer. So if we walk outside and we say, how tall is your house? Or how tall is my house? We will use either the standard system, feet and inches, or we'll use the metric system. We'll use centimeters and meters. And based on SI measurements and that sort of thing, we will come up with the same answer. So when we talk about the nature of truth, we are talking about those things that do not appeal to human emotions in order to arrive at an answer that we can share, because we can't share each other's emotions through anything but sympathy and empathy, which are not quantifiable in the way that we are talking about truth. So I said what I meant, and I meant what I said. Emotions play the same. No, I know. I am being emphatic, not because of what you said, but because I really do care about the answer, right? I care about this answer. So this is not directed at you, Gotcha. And it's not directed at any individual listener. This is what was behind my answer. Emotion plays exactly the same role in arriving at a truth as it does at a falsehood, because we don't share emotions in the same way that we can quantify other events.
Okay, yeah, I reserve the right to expand my answer too.
Sorry, Dave. I think I ran over you to give
2 minutes if you can.
Okay, yeah, I'll make it less. I think that there are different kinds of truth claims. There's the empirical truth claims. There is a playing card under the rock. I don't care how you feel about what that playing card is. It is what it is. You know, if it's an ace of spades, it's an ace of spades, and wanting it to be a two of hearts or feeling like it should be is not going to change it. Your emotions are not going to change the course of mathematics. There is a mathematical answer to a mathematical question, and emotions don't play any part of that. And so I would say that things that we can attach the label of truth to are simply going to fit in that category. And if they don't fit in that category, then applying the word truth to it is a categorical error. And so things where emotions do have sway, I would be hesitant to even use the word truth in those situations. Thanks.
Perfect. How about you, Matt?
I think there's a far more important issue at stake here, and that's pronunciation. My Englishness means that I say Tara.
Oh.
So
okay.
I think there's going to be a problem here. So there may need to be an adjudication from the lady herself.
Well, she's a Canadian, so I think I should take. I'm the authoritative source until we learn differently.
So which is it,
British, I
Tara
shall
or
not
Tara?
be moved.
What?
Which is it, Dale? Tara or Tara?
It's Terra. I've never.
So that
heard
is
Tara.
also that's our planet, Terra firma. So Matthew, just out of
The
curiosity,
goddess
when you
Terra, by the way.
do you, see,
Well, you know what? Actually, yeah, I actually do pronounce things stupidly. Like, you know, the city of Tyre.
You're telling me.
I pronounce things Kyrie. So we're going to skip Matthew.
Dale, that was so well played. That was Matthew,
Oh
I'm
man,
curious,
you joined their team.
Do you say terra firma? Do you know the expression terra firma? And would you pronounce it that way?
It's terra firma because there's an E in terra firma.
Oh, that's right. And Tara's name is actually T-A-R. Fair enough. Good
Yeah.
point.
When your
Consider
English
yourself
spelling's putting
whipped.
unnecessary E's on everything. I told you that would come back to bite you.
The brick guy. All right, Matthew, go ahead. What's your answer for Tara?
I'm going to be equally short and sweet. The emotions should be eliminated as much as possible. If you're emotionally tied to a claim or have an emotional response to a claim, then your assertion that that claim is true should be considered suspect.
Yeah, and I think I'm all on the same side. I do think that emotions are very poor indicators of truth or gaining knowledge. They shouldn't be relied upon. It's been proven they're often unreliable. And this is why Christian apologists make distinctions between the emotional versus logical versions of the problem of evil and suffering and that sort of thing. And one thing, because I know when I did my show on properly based beliefs, a lot of people were thinking that, he just has some sort of feeling, or I think it was described by Sarah as like a warm, fuzzy type feeling when she was reading the Bible. And, that's what people think I'm saying I have with the witness of the Holy Spirit. And it's not the case. Like, I do know the difference between, a warm, fuzzy feeling and irresistible inclination. It's not like and think about it this way. If you reflect on the proposition 1 + 1 = 2, I don't think you would describe yourself as having some kind of warm, fuzzy feeling. You're not going to be curling up next to the fireplace with, these mathematical truths or something like that. But yeah, I know Tara was looking forward to this, or Tara was looking forward to this. So I am a human being. I do have emotions, of course. And I just wanted to share a couple movies that, so The Count of Monte Cristo, and there's also another one, a low budget movie that I think is a great Christian movie. And it's really clever, actually. It's called The Encounter. I don't know if anyone's seen that, but it basically places Jesus in the modern day, reacting to reacting to people in the modern day. But yeah, those ones, for whatever reason, those movies, yeah, I like them. You know, I don't know if I would say I had warm, fuzzy feeling, but you know, I do know what an emotion is, and I do contrast that with what I'm describing as an irresistible inclination.
That is exactly what a robot would say if they were trying to fool you. I do know what an emotion is.
Shut up,
watched
Dave.
this
So
very effective movie.
So Andrew, it's me and you only for the rest of the podcast then.
So I think that there's something else interesting here, and Dale, this is not turning on you, because by and large you and I agree, but it is the case that I have experienced. Sorry to the listeners, and perhaps perhaps I'm pulling out my geek card here, but I actually do have very warm feelings in the same way that I feel warm feelings toward people. I do have certain emotional reactions to solving very complex problems as a coder. And it is the case that I've actually experienced those things in a science class or in a math class, because in some sense, we experience gratification when we accomplish something that is important to us. I'm not trying to go behind this discussion.
That's true.
But,
no, I think, yeah, when you say it that way, yeah, okay, I think that is true. And yeah, okay, go ahead.
The purest joy you can experience is when you write some code and it works perfectly first time.
Yes, that is absolutely right. And one of the things I had in mind, in fact, it's sort of the holy grail of programming, isn't it, Matthew? That there's, you get a group of coders together, and what we're trying to do is write good code. And the person that writes the best code, we often talk about elegant code, right? And that person does have a very powerful sense of having done something good.
Okay. And
you mentioned it, man.
Really...
Beautiful code is just such a. I would print it out and I would stick it to my wall. It's just awesome.
Yes.
I think the audience has seen through this already. If you think that the most beautiful thing in the universe is writing code that runs, you need to get out more. Better yet,
iPhone.
Let me rephrase what I said. Yeah.
If I got out more, I wouldn't be here in my office talking to you, David.
If I got out, more people would shoot at me.
You're in the wrong country. Come to this one. That doesn't happen here.
I'm sorry, Dan.
Sorry, Dale.
You've got two more questions for us. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll just rephrase that. The number 2 or some programming code, they're not my type. They've never done it for me personally. But for you guys, have at it. Whatever works for you guys.
Programmers do it on keyboards.
Very nice.
Oh, sorry.
Yep. Okay.
This is a half Christian show, man. Come on. All right, no. Okay. So
I'm sorry.
From confusion. This question is from Vic. I'm probably I'll have Matt say Vic Ruiz. And David was really excited about this. So the way he asked the question was really not really geared towards the skeptics, which it should be, because they were the ones on the show. They're the ones that wrote the book. But it stemmed from the religious confusion and the variety of biblical opinions. So I tried to sort of twist it. And I said, okay, so it's undeniable that there is this religious confusion. It's one of the premises in my 11 premise argument, for example. And I use this argument and twist it to the Christian's advantage. But I was wondering, I know David is, I'm not sure if you guys are, but I have this notion of what's called undue confusion. So I differentiate between, I guess, for lack of a better word, good and bad, bad or allowable confusions. So I was wondering, are there any forms of confusion on religious matters that would be allowable? Like, could this be allowed to occur, but it's not somehow God who's responsible for this confusion? Or is it just, if you're confused on anything, it's always God's fault? The human being, it doesn't matter if the human being is closed-minded or whatever, or not interested in the truth, it's always God that's responsible for any confusion that results. Number 5. Okay, Matt, it's your turn to go first.
Okay. I've got another really short answer. I'm going to caveat with it's possible that I got slightly confused reading the question, but I'll give my answer and you can follow up how you see fit. My answer is this confusion only serves to show just how man-made the religion is, and that any claims that it provides a path to knowledge about God are bogus.
Okay. So that was Vic's actual question, but I want to twist it for you and put it on the other end. Is there any form of confusion that doesn't show what you said, where it is possible God could allow for this type of confusion and that's not a problem for Christians?
If that was the case, I would say that God is a trickster God and not a God that I want anything to do with.
Okay, perfect. So David, your turn next.
I'm looking at 1 Corinthians 14. For God is not the author of confusion. That's what it's supposed to say here, but that's not actually what it says. Just trust me, it says that somewhere around here. God is not the author of confusion. And if you believe that, then there is no such thing as good confusion. You can't say, well, he's the author of the good kind of confusion, but he's not the author of the bad kind of confusion. You can't separate it like that. It's kind of like saying, my dad has the good cancer. There's no good cancer, and so I do believe that confusion, in fact, is a very powerful counter-apologetic, and so I don't think that there is any room to say, this kind of confusion is okay, because that directly contradicts what the Bible says.
Okay, and Andrew,
can I just jump in with a question on that one? So you compared confusion with cancer in that answer, David. How about if we compare confusion with pain? You could arguably say there's good pain, because if you put your hand near something that's hot that's going to burn you, you feel pain first, which is your body's indication saying something bad is happening, move your hands now. Is there a way that confusion could be conflated with that kind of warning pain?
No.
Thank you.
I thought about other examples that you could bring up, like, for instance, debt. Some people talk about good debt and bad debt. Well, some debt is necessary. But in the perfect world, if we could make a world without debt, we would do that. We wouldn't talk about good debt and bad debt. We have to do that because debt is reality. And cholesterol is another one of those things. Well, we got good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, kind of, but we're all going to die. If we could design a body that was going to live forever, we wouldn't have, cholesterol as an issue at all. And so if you say, some confusion, though, makes you stronger, well, that makes you stronger maybe in a kind of a weak, kind of a we're only human and, the world is the way it is kind of way. But then we don't really need God to explain it at all. So if we're talking about a system that God made, and especially a book that God wrote, so we can eliminate all of the variables, all the human variables, and this is the pure, unadulterated Word of God, then we can't insert those excuses into that. There is no reason for any confusion in that thing that we would call good confusion.
Okay, and just before I go to Andrew, I just want to clarify that. I do think all forms of confusion are less than morally ideal. They're all else being equal, we don't want to be confused about anything. But I was misspeaking when I was sort of saying good versus bad. That's why I sort of corrected myself and said, okay, well, allowable, because any confusion is not morally ideal. That's why it requires a justification that I tried to come up with. But so think of it allowable confusion versus bad confusion.
Well, but it's the same answer, though. If you're saying God allowed it, then God is still culpable for it. If he allowed it in a situation when he could have disallowed it, If he could have
Okay.
cleared it up without the confusing being there, then changing it to allowed doesn't make it better.
Fair enough. Okay, so Andrew, sorry, it's your turn.
No problem. So I think I want to turn this glass around. I think I want to look at it.
You got to
through the
give your
other
answer.
end. No.
I want your answer. I'm actually interested. Like the audience, I want to know what do you think?
So you are going to get it, but it does require turning the scope around.
Okay.
So when we talk about confusion, we are necessarily talking about those things, I think, from either perspective, that can be attributed to natural causes. So you might ask me a question and I might misunderstand it. Matthew said something about that a moment ago. He said, maybe I misread the question, but I'm going to give you my answer and you can clear it up if you need to, right? And so when we talk about confusion, what we are saying is the world is a natural place. And so if you're saying God is not the author of confusion, we do live in a world where confusion takes place. So what are you really appealing to when you say to me that God is not the author of confusion if we live in a world where confusion does take place?
Yeah, like my take is the undue. I think he's referring to undue confusion, and I know is that in the sufficient attachment debate. Like we go into that a lot. Is that where I get into the undue confusion? And David,
let me ask you a question. Okay, but you say undue confusion, and so that strikes me as the very same line between sort of objective and subjective, in the sense that what you call undue confusion may necessarily not be confusing to someone else. So I don't think that you have, I don't think you've drawn a very clear line. You've created a distinction without a difference. What do you mean by those things that are confusing and those things that are not, and for who? It seems to me that you've described a subjective standard.
Okay, well, I do, like, this is a part, I do define this, but I haven't done it for you guys. So, yeah, undue confusion is any confusion that unnecessarily hinders or inhibits someone who meets certain conditions from achieving their ultimate purpose. So within a Christian context, that is to be saved. That's the purpose of divine revelation. That was why Jesus came. That's why God became incarnated and as Jesus and died on the cross for our sins. So that's the main topic. Confusion that hinders that goal is bad confusion under my definitions, or is undue confusion. However, there's the caveat that it has to be unjustified or unnecessary confusion that results in that. And that's where I get into my conditions. The skeptic has to be sincerely open-minded to truth. They have to be actively seeking after the truth. They can't just be intellectually lazy and waiting for some answer. That there has to be some sort of reasonable effort to try and discover what the truth is. And then the third one is they have to openly be willing to follow the truth when they discover it. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. This is from your guys' greatest friend, I think. Nick Sack asks, I know you guys are not the best of friends, but he's got some good things to say, I think. And he asks a question about, again, related to the resurrection. Now, because we already got into the factuals, like he's basically taking Andrew to task because during the show you were going after Justin Brierly for saying that the resurrection is as certain as a fact of Julius Caesar crossing the Rubicon, and then Justin rebutted, no, that it's the fact that Jesus was crucified or anything. But rather than getting into historicity of facts, because I already asked that above or earlier. I'm wondering what's your take on the value of, the way Christian apologists use historical criteria, such as the criterion of embarrassment or, multiple independent attestation and that sort of thing. And I was wondering if you see any merit in using these types of criteria or arguments in arriving at a knowledge of these historical facts, or are they just totally using that sort of thing? So this is number 6. So that's going to be David is first.
Okay.
So I think Yeah.
I went through enough distortion there where I think I missed some things. So I'm going to just need you to ask the question one more time. I'm sorry.
Sure. Do you know the historical criteria that Christian apologists use, like, the criterion of embarrassment or multiple independent attestations?
Oh, yeah, historical criteria. Uh-huh.
Is there any value in that, or are they totally worthless as arguments? Or, yeah.
I think they are almost worthless in the hands of laymen. So when we're talking about historical criterion, this is a very academic thing. And it's not meant to be handled by laymen. It's a little bit like handing a layman a scalpel to perform a surgical procedure and asking if that feels okay to them. It's not supposed to. So I think it's the wrong realm. And I think that a lot of us enthusiasts get kind of tied up in these academic debates as if we were academics. I mean, we understand enough to talk to listen to what they're saying, but frankly, we couldn't pass the same doctoral classes that they pass, even of the people that we think are idiots and that we don't agree with. We didn't go through that study. We don't have the original languages studies. We don't have all of the historical citations that they used, or the 8 years of information that they have taken to get there. So I think just at a basic level, when laymen start flinging around academic jargon as if they were proficient with it, I'm suspicious of the outcome anyway. But that said, as a layman, I will say I will side with some academics on this that think that the criterion that historians use is questionable. And this comes from historians. So historians are not completely in agreement on what makes good criterion. Just to give you one example of this, the criterion of embarrassment is an embarrassing criterion. And I thought so before I read that other academics thought that too. But the way Christians use it in particular is kind of embarrassing. They will say, well, these women show up at the tomb. That's an embarrassment. And so it must be true. Well, here's the thing. That's not an embarrassment. That is the only way the story reads that makes sense. The reason the women were at the tomb was not because they were faithful, but because they were preparing the body. So to say that this is, this fits with the criterion of embarrassment is embarrassing. So they're straining at gnats to make that criterion fit with their judgment. And there are plenty of other historians who will look at that and say, yeah, that's wrong. Another one would be, well, Jesus was baptized by John. That's an embarrassment. Well, no, it wasn't. There are a lot of little things in the New Testament we don't have time to go through one by one, where Christians will say, well, that's an embarrassment. If it wasn't true, it wouldn't be there. No, I think in every case that I have seen Christians bring up, they're misunderstanding some nuance of the literature as to why that, in fact, is not an embarrassment. And so because that is a criteria that can be so misused to make any point that you want to, many historians on this basis do not use it and do not support it. And so I just think that a lot of layman Christian jump in on this historical criterion thing because some Christian historians have used it to try to make their case. And the layman, rather than really understanding what's behind it, it just kind of grabs on and says, yeah, I'll take that. So yeah, I don't think we should be in that discussion anyway. And if we do get into it, you'll find that historians are very much in disagreement on the criterion.
Okay, so Matt, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I've got quite a long answer. It might not cover, I don't know if it's going to cover everything, but I've done several short ones. So
can you get it done in 5 minutes though? Or?
I'll see what I can do. But first, I'm going to read from you Justin's book about the Rubicon. This is what he says. This means, for example, that we have far better historical evidence for the life of Jesus than we do for the crossing of the Rubicon by Caesar. Now, I have a problem with that. Justin compared a single event in the life of Julius Caesar, the crossing of the Rubicon, with the existence of Jesus as an individual. This is a mismatched comparison. Either compare events from each person's life or compare the evidence for each individual existing, but don't mix the two. This is not either a genuine narrative mistake by Justin, or, given that other apologists helped Justin with his book, it exposes a poor level of historical appreciation by Christians. So that's about that. My favourite historical comparison is the story of King Harold in the Battle of Hastings. The legend goes that King Harold died by having an arrow shot in his eye. There are a few accounts that hint that's the case, accounts penned after the event. The Bayeux tapestry, I believe it's available to view in France, is an embroidered depiction of the battle which shows Harold holding an arrow with the tip of the arrow near his eye. This depiction doesn't show him dead, and like the writings, it's an image created after his death and most likely by people who were not there to witness it. Historians generally agree that the arrow eye incident is a legend that didn't really happen as described. And this is how most events from that long ago are viewed. The broad action, a person died or crossed a river, can be accepted, but the smaller specific details should be seen with a very healthy dose of skepticism, because there is simply no way to be certain at all. And this is especially true for events which require some form of supernatural or magical activity, because the supernatural realm needs to be confirmed. And in the absence of that confirmation, any accounts of supernatural activity from the past should be subject to the highest skepticality possible. And that's how I view the story of Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. It's a story that has passed into legend, but the event most likely did not happen as described.
Okay, perfect. And Andrew, it's your turn.
Okay, mine is short. It seems to me that there's a lot to do about the minimum facts for the resurrection, and I will always happily stack those supposed historical facts against the historic and scientific fact that people don't rise from the dead.
Perfect. And I guess on my take, I do think that David's original points make a lot of sense. Actually, I do notice that sometimes people can apply these criteria and misapply these criteria. And, like I know Richard Carrier, for example, he addresses these historical criteria and some of the problems that come up with trying to use them. And, I think there are some valid points, but I don't think he's necessarily, like with the criterion of embarrassment, I think that is a good criterion to use. But I don't think you're arguing against the criteria themselves so much as their misapplication by lay people. So in that sense, yeah, I would agree. We need to be careful when we're applying these and look carefully what the scholarship says, see if there's any counter arguments, to determine if it really was embarrassing for the gospel writers to mention that women were the first people to see Jesus and that sort of thing. So, David mentioned one counter response. I personally do think that this is a good reason to think that the women were the first to see Jesus is a good argument based on the criterion of embarrassment. I think it really is embarrassing, but you need to.
I don't think so.
That's fair enough, but I'm just saying, yeah, the point is, it's not about the specific arguments, it's about the criterion themselves. I think the criterion themselves are good, but you have to be careful about misapplying them, because you can make, false judgments. Like you said, you think I'm totally off on that fact. That's not a problem with the criterion per se, it's the problem with me not applying it properly or something.
So I'm not rebutting you. I do want to clarify my position, though. I'm not, in fact, saying it's just the application of the criteria, and that's not what other scholars are arguing either. I am saying that the criterion itself is faulty, which mirrors what other scholars say. And so one of the reasons you would say it's the criteria and not just the application is because we have no idea what was embarrassing to the writers. We have to read a lot of ourselves into what we think they were trying to say that this would have been embarrassing or that would have been embarrassing. We have no idea.
Don't we have as a sort of global society. A lot of criteria that argue against the resurrection. Aren't we in some sense sort of special pleading for this idea that there was a Messiah sent from heaven, and some special facts add up to him rising from the dead and going to build mansions for everyone? It seems to me that when we talk about these criteria of resurrection, we're ignoring the great body of history that says things just don't work that way.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough. You need to look at certain counter, if I think I understand what you're saying is that these criteria can be used to establish facts that go against the truth of the resurrection or something like that. So it's a double-edged sword. Is that your point?
Well, I think maybe, but
okay.
If I'm trying to follow David's line of thinking.
Oh, okay.
And so, we've got the criteria of embarrassment, as for instance.
Sorry, just to interrupt. You'll have the final word here because I'm trying to keep it within 2 hours, and we got one more question to go. But
fair enough, because I was throwing this back.
Actually, if it's that close to 2 hours, we'll split it into two.
Yeah.
We started.
The extravaganza week is back.
No, it's not. No.
And on my end, I'm just thinking of the audience or whatever. Like if you want to go slightly over 2 hours, we've only got one more question.
No, let's go over. Let's do it all.
Let's go for it.
I'll split it logically if necessary.
Gotcha.
But you got to remember, the first 30 or 40 minutes of this recording has nothing to do with the show.
It's all cuttable, isn't it?
Yeah. So
you got to get rid of that.
I can tell you that there's about 45 or 50 minutes that won't make it.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I kind of want to generalize David's thought here. So you talk about the criteria of embarrassment as an important element in establishing that, these women were the first at the tomb, and et cetera, et cetera. The whole line of implication after that, right? But surely we could go through history and dig up embarrassing facts in other religions, and they could sort of use that as a play to say, well, this is so unlikely that it must be confirming. And that's what I think I heard from David.
Okay, and just since we bought ourselves just a hair more time,
was that fair, David?
No, that's fair, but I want to leave an example so that people know exactly, so they don't have to grope around for what I meant. So it's a quick example, and it's easy. So in fact, someone else mentioned it, so we'll talk about the women being the first witnesses. That's somehow embarrassing. Here's why the criterion of embarrassment simply cannot apply there. Let's just say everything they say about the reliability of the women's testimonies was true, which is not. But the criterion of embarrassment does not apply here if the author wasn't talking to dyed-in-the-wool Orthodox Jewish men, because those people would have said, women, feh. But if the author was aiming his message at a different Jewish society that did accept women in maybe the lower rungs of society in particular, where women were considerably more important and where there was a lot more egalitarianism, then you can say, oh, no, not only was that not embarrassment, that was the point. He was talking to those kind of people. Those are the people that he was trying to reach and convert. Now, you have to assume that you know who he was trying to reach before you can say whether this is an embarrassing thing or not. You do not know that. And so at no point can you apply the criterion of embarrassment to this, because you don't know what the author would have considered embarrassing about this. The women showing up first and that being different from what society would expect may have been his entire point.
Okay, fair enough. So I guess just as a last couple points, because it isn't about this specific example, it's about the criteria in general, but you raised a good point. So first of all, Andrew raises a good point that, well, the criterion of embarrassment or these other historical criteria could be used to establish facts in other religions. Yeah, so what? I use that to that's why I think Muhammad probably existed. There are some embarrassing things that I think were probably embarrassing for these Islamic authors and within that culture. So I would say, yeah, on a balance of probabilities, I think it's historical that Muhammad thought he was demon possessed at some point. On David's point, yes, that's true. So we can't. It's not that we know nothing. It's a little bit tricky. It can get a little bit trickier at some points in trying to identify. So this fact was identified in Mark, and you're giving, Bart Ehrman gave this, or Richard Carrier gave it in some mythicist debates as well. But so we can establish that at least within Orthodox circles later on, this fact was embarrassing. Certain facts were embarrassing. Luke and Matthew omit certain stories, probably because they find it weird. So that this was an argument by Zebra Cook. What? Someone have a dog?
Yes, it's my dog. He's been trying to chime in for a while.
So yeah, it does go back. Okay, well, we need to assess, would Mark have found that embarrassing, if you want to use that argument, and assess Mark. Maybe it is what David says, that no, well, Mark's whole point was he's upturning the social order, like the first will be last in heaven and the last will be first, and that sort of thing. So that's part of the consideration underneath this criteria to see if it's being applied properly or not. That's why I don't think the criteria itself is bad, but it's how we apply it. Are you just saying, oh yeah, of course, that's embarrassing. Who the heck would want a woman to be your primary witness or something like that? So it does get more complicated, but I would just stand firm that I don't think that point at least argues against the criteria so much as it is the application. But I'll end it here unless anyone really, really wants to go more on this. But we do have a question from Marvin next. So what do you guys want to do? Keep going or go with Marvin?
Let's take Marvin.
Yeah, let's take the question.
All right.
Hi, Marvin. You'll see that I stuck up for you here, Marvin. Just so you know.
That's not off the air, though. You should have been hearing what he was saying about you. So yeah, this is I guess this is related to the third part, but I didn't remember this in the show. But there was a third part about Christian value or like the meaning of life type thing. So he says, now the believer, the Christian, often talks about life having meaning, value, and purpose. What does the skeptic mean by those terms when they use them in the same context? Andrew, you're first.
Oh wow! I didn't realize it would get handed to me. I wasn't keeping track. Okay, so I'm going to first draw out what I mean when I use each of those words, right? Because words have usages; they don't have definitions. So we've got to be pretty careful not to take someone else's loaded words in this case. So meaning. Is probably something different internally. Something may mean something to me, right? It has a particular way that it fits into my internal landscape. Whether I can ever communicate that meaning successfully is a separate issue. So no matter what meaning is to me, and no matter where I get that meaning, I don't know that we ever share meaning through anything other than language or shared experience. I mean, we may kayak together and have some sense of sharing an event, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'll leave meaning and say that the same is probably true for value and purpose. So I don't know in exactly what way Marvin is suggesting that we ought to talk about value and purpose. But the purposes that I have as an individual largely come from what things mean to me. So should I consider my job as a developer as an external thing that was sort of painted on me at the beginning, right? Certainly, coding doesn't mean the same thing to David or Dale, to you, as it means to me. So what do we mean when we're talking about meaning? I'm not sure what the question really is about. Okay. And the same thing is true for value and purpose.
Okay. So, David, what would you say about this?
So the genesis of this question coming from Marvin is probably a statement that I made, a year ago on the Unbelievable boards, where I suggested on a program where the topic was cosmic meaning, this idea of universal purpose. At that time, Marvin was agitating for, there must be a universal purpose and eternal consequences. Things have an eternal kind of meaning with a capital M, or purpose with a capital P, or value with a capital P. And I suggested that as humans, we have no more our individual lives have no more cosmic purpose than dog poop. And so I have taken some feedback on that for a while.
Okay.
And I
very non-acerbic way of saying it.
So I'm pretty sure that that's what he means, and I stand by exactly what I said. On our lives didn't have any meaning before we were born. Even while we're here, the star, 100 light years away, does not care and is not moved one way or the other by our existence. And 100 years after we're gone, technology notwithstanding, we will be forgotten by every living person on Earth. Only the very few of us, might be remembered. And I don't think that there's anything that I can do to be on that list of people that would be remembered. And so, in terms of some cosmic meaning stretching out eternally before we existed, or out eternally after we existed in throughout space and time, its entirety, even though it will never be touched by us, I think it's nonsensical to say that our lives have meaning in that regard. Our lives only have meaning and purpose in a very local sense. It means something to us, and we define our purpose. It means something to the people within our sphere of influence. So it definitely has a limited meaning, but it doesn't have any cosmic meaning. To suggest otherwise is to suggest that some type of fate, we're born and we are fated to be a certain thing or do a certain thing. And when you go down that road, you kind of have to say things like, well, the person that died at 1 year old from cholera, their life had such meaning from the beginning. God put them here for a purpose, and their suffering, he put their suffering there so that other people would learn the value of limited lifespan. And you start saying ridiculous things like that to try to pull out some cosmic meaning from disastrous things that just aren't there.
Okay, perfect. Matt, your turn.
I think has already been hinted at. There's some context required for extracting what is meant by the words meaning, value, and purpose. I can guess, given that it's coming from the Christian perspective, that it's some kind of a heavenly, divine, objective meaning. From a skeptic, as a skeptic, that means nothing to me. So what in my life has meaning, value, or purpose? It is what motivates me. I have a job. I have to get on a train in the morning to go to my job. The purpose of that is to generate an income for my family so that I can have a meaningful life at home. Is there anything that would cause me to stop doing that job? Well, yes. David and Andrew already know that one of my hobbies is acting. I'm very involved in a local drama group. I've got the leading role in the next play I'm in, Plug. no one's going to come and watch it. If a scout was going to be sitting in that audience would offer me a paid role to act in a movie after doing one of those plays, would I pack in my job and take that? Yes. And then my motivation and my meaning and my purpose would be utterly switched to doing that. It's all very much of the moment and what motivates me for the goals that I want and have an eye for, is entirely subjective. As I mentioned in the last roundtable that we did, I've got missionary family, and I spent the former years of my life in Central Africa growing up in that missionary environment. We had some unpleasant things happen to members of my family and in the wider community during that time. I would be unhappy that somebody would express to me that those were part of some greater cosmic purpose in life. And if someone was to suggest to me that some of those atrocious things were part of some greater good, I can guarantee that my response to that would be very unpleasant. So, no, I reject the concept of any kind of greater purpose or meaning, and it is very much... So to answer the question, what does that mean? To me, it's what motivates me.
Perfect. Okay. I think we can leave it there, because the question is, what does the skeptic mean? I'm not a skeptic, so I don't know. That's up for you guys to define as you guys have laid out your case. Are there any? That's it for all of our questions for this week. Are any final comments we should? I guess. Is there any final closing remarks that either David and Andrew have based on their experience of being on Unbelievable that they want to leave for the audience? And Matt, as a listener, is there anything, a final comment you want to say about the show? We'll start with Andrew.
I don't have any final comments about the show, but I will shamelessly plug Matthew's production and say that in the production, the lead must have a Southern accent. And Matthew has been practicing his Southern accent. So if there are indeed scouts listening to this combined episode of Asking Atheists Anything and Skeptics and Seekers, go watch Matthew perform and give him a shot elsewhere so that he can pack in his job as an IT guy.
Okay. Well, is that Southern U.S. or Southern Wales, or Southern internationally can mean anything?
No, he's got to actually have a Southern accent in the way that you and I would understand it. Matthew and I have been talking about it. Well, hey, he pronounces Tara properly. Okay, I'm done. I'm sorry.
All right, David, do you have anything to say? Any final things?
I took some notes thinking that the program would go a very different way. In round one, it did not. I did not use any of those notes. So, do I have some things regarding the show appearance that have not been said yet? Pages. So they will show up in other shows and programs. So lock it in at skepticsandseekers.wordpress.com or any of the other places where I might pop in, and probably in the form of supplementals and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think I'll leave it at that.
Okay, and Matt, I know you weren't on the show, but I guess just as a listener, did you have any sort of final things you wanted to say about it, or?
Well, I did a partial review of it in our last show. I won't take up a lot of time on this, but I did like the show. I did like listening to the show. The show has generated quite a lot of conversation on the forum. I would like to see Justin do something like that again. It helps his book as well as other projects. And I'd like to see Justin being a little bit more brave in... I hope you're listening, Justin. Be a little bit more brave in the conversations with some of his atheist listeners, one example of a show that he could do. Talk to some people, get some people on who've lost their faith and talk about their journey. Be really, really brave, Justin, and bring in that kind of conversational show, see what that generates.
So
Loud cheers.
I know that we're done, but sorry, Matthew, that's too good of a comment to just leave there. I've got a dog pile onto it. This week's show generated over 1,600 comments before the new one hit. Not
That's
over
a fact.
1,000, not over 1,500, over 1,600. There is not a show in the archive that can boast that for this period of time. And I've been asking the board, what do you think? What do you think that is? And universally, the board agrees. It ain't us. We're not brilliant. Andrew and I aren't brilliant. We're hicks from the sticks. It's not the topics. These talks been talked to death on the show. And so what was it? And I think that I agree with, I don't know if it was Marvin or someone else who usually doesn't have much good to say about me, but I agree with them fully. It's the fact that we're hometown boys from the community that built this program. And so I would say to Justin, there are a lot of people on the board who are smarter than Andrew, cleverer than me in a pinch, and that the community would also rally around. And that goes for Christian and non-Christian. So you really should do more looking at the community that is sitting right there under your nose every week, and that is making this show what it is. There are a lot of voices that could help this show.
So this is Dave. You've said enough that it's got to be piled onto. Sorry, this is my call for Val. Val is probably one of the top intellects I've ever had the pleasure of reading in philosophy. He makes his home there. He deserves to be on Unbelievable.
Excellent.
Sarah, and Sarah, Matthew, Joyce, I want to see them on a show because they are so much cleverer than you realize. Just
Yes.
from comments on, I've had Andrew and I have both had a chance to talk to Sarah extensively because she was part of the book. Joyce comes around Skeptics and Seekers, and we did a whole comment show just recently with some of her observations. I disagreed with every one of them, but they were all worth interacting with. There are riches on both sides of the aisle. And if there's anything that Andrew and I can do to help the community, it's to say, Justin, what you did for us, do for some of the rest of them.
Yes, and by the way, I'll also put in a shameless plug for two more. Everyone's skeptical friend, Jim, deserves a spot. And Michael Brady deserves a spot.
Oh, yeah.
Both of those guys, look, I would not get in a debate with Jim when Jim's at his best. And I'd strongly advise nobody to. Jim is a power, and he's a friendly guy. He's a good voice for Unbelievable. And by the way, our Chapter 1 writer, Matthew Taylor, deserves a spot on Unbelievable, as does our current moderator, Dag. He's already been read out
I
in the
absolutely
mailbag.
want to see Dag on the show. I want to see Dag on the show in the worst kind of way, because if you
You can't steal this. You can't steal this.
I'm stealing it.
Have it.
I want Dag on the show.
Look, Dale has already been read out of the mailbag from Justin. And so I think all we're saying is there's a deep bench of people in the community. And Justin has regular people on, regularly. Didn't have a better word. Sorry, this is all I had. So if you're listening, everyone that is listening that writes in, David and I didn't particularly want this glory. We don't particularly want it after this. We did this because we had a community book. We did this because we came from the community, and we sincerely believe that Justin needs to reach into this community more, because some of his best intellectual talent posts every week on the discussion boards.
Yeah. If you think 1,600 is a big number, I would pay pay-per-view money to have Joyce versus Sarah. I'd pay $30 for the show and $10 a day during the week to participate in the comments. So you're not even beginning to cap what that audience has to offer, Justin. So you should think about doing it at least once every couple of months.
I'll promote the fight so that I can take the promoter's cut. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I think you guys have taken a lot of the words out of my mouth. But yeah, just from the Christian perspective, I thought this was a great show. I really enjoyed it, and I sent an email to Justin saying, congratulations on, first of all, dealing with David. I know what it's like dealing with him week after week, but I know he can be a tough opponent. But yeah, no, good on him. He was not just a moderator, but he was also participating in the show. That was something new, and interacting with people that and interact with on a weekly basis. I think this was a good idea for a show, and I hope it does establish a precedent. Have some more on, whoever wants to go on and say their piece. It's a good idea every once in a while to get a break from the scholars and stuff.
Gentlemen, I think we're wrapped. Oh, sorry, Dale. You go ahead.
That sounds like a wrap to me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was. So have a good week, everybody. Say goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.